Hello, folks. It's lovely to have you here with us this week. I am super excited this week to have women in technology from around the world. We have Keren Elazari from Israel. We've got Meredith Patterson, who I believe is in Belgium currently at the moment, although God knows where she is on the globe on any day-to-day basis. And we've got Tarah Brannigan in New Zealand. It is wonderful to have you all here today. Thank you so much. I would
Thanks
love
for
it.
inviting us.
No, absolutely. So you jump on in. Tara, tell us who you are and how the hell did you get to New Zealand and where are the hobbits?
I think I am a hobbit, but I've actually been coming to New Zealand since I was 12 years old. I was a super nerdy little kid, and I got to come on this student ambassador trip. And I spent 2 weeks in Australia and 1 week in New Zealand, and I apparently came back to the Midwest. I'm originally from Michigan, and I told my mom very determined, like, one day I'm gonna move there, and she's like, cool. You live that dream, and it just coincidentally, complete happenstance. The guy I ended up falling in love with in Seattle is a Kiwi. We've been together over a decade now. And I actually got a job opportunity here at a game company down in Wellington called Pickpock. Great folks. And they ended up, bringing us out here. We moved out about just over 2 years ago now. I've just been loving it. New Zealand is just absolutely, it's such a nice change of pace. I just love it here.
Meredith or Karen, jump on in.
Okay, hi everyone. Keren Elazari here, calling from Tel Aviv on the coast of the Mediterranean. I don't know if you guys can hear me and see me. I guess you can. I've been here, born and raised in Tel Aviv. I've been here for more than 30 years. I'm in the security business, so I'm a cybersecurity researcher. I work with Tel Aviv University here and with GigOm, which is a media and research company in California. I've published some interesting insights and research recently. I occasionally also write for Wired and Scientific American, other publications like that, and just try to make a difference in the world of cybersecurity. So that's what I'm all about. Thanks for joining the Hangout today.
I guess that makes it my turn. Hi, so I'm Meredith. I'm originally from Texas, but I've lived in Brussels, Belgium since 2011. Before that, I was in Leuven for a couple of years. I moved there from Silicon Valley because my husband was working on his PhD in well, officially it was electrical engineering, but he was doing cryptography, working on anonymity and privacy. And then he died in 2011. But I ended up staying over here actually just because the community that I'd gotten to know here was where I'd put down roots. I mean, people banded together to help me move into a new place and keep going, and this is home now.
That is amazing and awesome. So yeah, jump on in. Tara, tell us more about what it is that you do in New Zealand. Games, New Zealand, hobbits. I think she's winning so far, ladies.
Well, I actually just left the game industry after almost a decade. Actually, more than a decade. Oh God, I'm getting old. Yeah, I actually moved down here to work at Pickpock as a customer relationship manager. So kind of building out all of the infrastructure on how we deal with the community, how we deal with our customers, what our responses to certain things are. Really fantastic team, had a great time there, but I just actually switched over to this new company, Whipster, which is just doing some really innovative stuff in the video editing space and collaboration. So it's really neat. You can actually click on the video and put a comment inline saying hey, we can't have this logo in the background. And instead of this big ugly email chain, you get to comment inline. The video editor sees that and goes, oh, crud, does a quick revision, uploads it, boom, it's approved. Awesome. It just makes your life so much easier. When I used to have to approve videos and that sort of stuff back at Xbox, I would have just killed to have this. But they're just a really innovative little group, and I'm getting to build out kind of a longer-term ambassador strategy. So how do we take the people who already love what we do, who are just genuinely passionate about our product and the people who make it, and how do we give back to them? How do we make this a better ecosystem for everybody involved? And that's just like, that's something I've wanted to do for at least like the last 5 years. I got to see a really fantastic talk about the Maker's Mark Ambassador Program, and ever since then I'm like, I want to do that. That sounds really interesting. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of project management, communication. It's a nice mix of diverse skills. Like, I don't like to do just one thing, so having a lot of challenges is awesome.
I don't like doing just one thing as well either. It's kind of dull to me, so I like doing lots of different stuff. Just as a refresher for my viewers and the people that are taking a look right now, what looks like we have one super gamer nerd, two security and cyber security researchers, and then I'm over here in the land of B2B SaaS companies, so doing what
also
fascinating to do.
Well, then my day job is also in natural language processing. You know, the traveling the world stuff is all for security. But you know, what keeps me here? I mean, and you know, like the way I have my visa is working for Nuance Communications. I work in clinical language understanding, which is kind of a fancy way of saying reading doctors' notes and figuring out stuff to do with them, which, you know, at the moment is mostly just medical coding, that thing that, you know, transcriptionists have to do when they're, you know, working out how to bill stuff to your insurance. You know, right now that's a very human intensive process, and so the product I work on automates that.
Very nifty. I have a question for all of you, which is this. We know that there's a lot of frustration and problems sometimes being a woman in technology, and one of the reasons why I thought about doing this Women Around the World Hangout was because I was really curious if the experience was any different in different countries. I'm especially interested to hear from Meredith and Tarah about this one. I know Keren's been to the U.S., but I think Meredith and Tarah are the two that are living outside the country they came from, and I'd love to hear about what the transition is like. What is different about being in Europe, in the South Pacific, in the Mediterranean than it is about being a woman in the U.S. in technology? Anecdotes are welcome now.
Well, I can go. Yeah, New Zealand is just a freakishly fantastic breath of fresh air. You know, I'd heard that the culture was fairly different, and I had some strange instances, like, throughout my relationship with my partner, where it seemed like he didn't understand that this could be a thing. He's like, well, but why would somebody do that? That makes so much more sense living here, because New Zealand is just so much further along in a lot of regards, in that, you know, there's no challenge to, you know, like, you know, well, why is she working in games? Are you really a gamer? You don't have that initial push of like, well, what games did you play? Are you just a, you know, casual game player? You know, there's not that challenge. It's just, the assumption is like, well, yeah, of course, why wouldn't she? If she wanted to, that's cool, that's great. Yes. And I think that just has to do a lot with the culture here. Like, New Zealand is the first country to give women the right to vote, and, you know, they had a female prime minister, and it wasn't a big deal. It's not a day-to-day thing here. Like, you know, going to conventions in particular, I wrote a thing about going to PAX Australia last year, and I hadn't realized how many defenses I actually had until I didn't need them. You know, I'm waiting every time I talk to a booth to do the, like, oh, are you here with somebody? Are you their girlfriend? And instead it's, oh, what company are you with? You know, it's just that automatic assumption that you belong there. Until proven otherwise, of course you do. Why would we even question that? That's not a problem.
It's crazy.
It's so nice.
We have so much armor now about being, you know, a woman in gaming or a woman in technology. I often tell people I'm the CEO of an HR company, and it sounds so horrible, but I just say, look, I'm the CEO of an HR company in Seattle, because I don't want to lead off with, I'm the CEO of a tech company, a B2B SaaS company in Seattle that's on its way up, or a tech startup, because their armor goes up weirdly, or their filters kick in somehow, and they go, but you don't look like a tech CEO. And I say, and a kid in a hoodie and pajamas in Silicon Valley does? So what is it like for you, Meredith or Keren?
Well, so, I mean, one probably useful bit of context here is that Nuance is a really international company. We've got offices all over the world. I'm not actually sure that the sun does set on, the Nuance empire. That's how many time zones we're talking here. So, I have to, communicate with a lot of other groups in other places, and most of my group is actually U.S. based. And I find it kind of interesting to notice that I've had the worst communication problems with other native speakers of English. Like it's like when I'm talking with or emailing with like my Belgian colleagues or my German colleagues, we're working in a language that isn't their first language, and I think we're sort of more careful with like. Just how we talk, and the thing is, I'm actually not like referring to like. Well, I mean, okay, you said anecdotes. So here's an example, right? So like, we had a guy on my team for a while whose dad was dying of cancer, and he was not handling it well. And some of us on the team were were having some issues with just how brusque this guy was being all the time, and he wasn't communicating stuff that he needed from us well. He wasn't communicating what he was trying to do well. It was just causing a lot of friction, and yet when my manager tried to go to him about it. He was pretty resistant to talking about that, and I just and I don't really see these kinds of situations arising, when I'm dealing with colleagues who aren't native speakers, and I wonder if there's just something about the sort of casual register that happens when you're dealing with people that you share that linguistic context with that I think sort of leads people to maybe be too casual sometimes. I don't know.
It's really fascinating. What do you think, Keren? Is there anything different about being in Tel Aviv?
Yeah, so I wanted to say a few things about my experience. I think it's actually quite unique to be a woman in the technology industry in Israel for a few different reasons, or maybe my own experience is quite unique. So the first and probably the most dominant reason, and this might be a shock or a surprise to you all, that in Israel, most young people join the army. It's a mandatory service. We've had that since the inception of the state. And women serve in the military just like the guys do. We all do. Everybody does.
My boss at an ISP was a former Israeli army colonel, and she was fucking amazing.
Cool. I'm happy to hear that. That's really cool. So I think what might seem like a very quote unquote male-dominated field, the army, the military, could seem like it should be a chauvinistic environment. And it probably still is in certain aspects. I mean, sure, I'm sure there's girls who join the army at 18 and they're sure they're going to serve their country and they still end up just, making coffee or typing documents for someone. But there's also a lot of girls like me that join the army and get a sense, get a chance to do something with technology, to learn about technology and serve their country and do something meaningful. So for me, that was very empowering and also equalizing, because I was just, a peer amongst peers with the people that I worked with, the security engineers that I worked with, regardless of their gender, and sometimes even regardless of their military rank, because when you work in cybersecurity, it's not just about rank, it's also about your merit and your skills. So I got that kind of unique opportunity to build myself in this field, and I'm talking about almost 15 years ago. I guess that's exposing my age, but this has been a while back, and for me it was the opportunity to just start my career in this field and be as everybody else, to be equal. So that was the first thing I want to say, which is quite unique. And I think to this date, if you go around in Israel to tech conferences, tech companies, if you go to meetups, a lot of the women that you'll meet who are in the technology industry, the women that are leading companies, the women that are leading teams within big companies, they would have probably gotten that first head start in the military service. Not exclusively, of course. There are also a lot of academics. There's a lot of PhDs with computer science degrees, math degrees. There's quite a lot of women in math and advanced math, in crypto. There's Professor Shefi Goldwasser, who is an Israeli woman, is actually, I think, the only woman to have won the Turing Award for math achievements or something like that. She's definitely the only Israeli to have won it.
I remember that, yeah. Very impressive.
And that's a big deal. But the other aspect of Israel is that it's a small place. It's a small country. It's a small community, and almost everybody knows everyone. So I have the opportunity to come and hear Professor Shefi Goldwasser, the Turing Award scientist, speak at Tel Aviv University, and I can just approach her and talk to her. And in a similar sense, now that I have some, prominence, I guess, in this industry, I can help other women, and they can approach me, and I can, mentor them, or I can help them, get a job, or recommend what they should do. Want to do something different in cybersecurity. So recently, I started the group for Israeli women in cybersecurity, and we have 85 women in the group, which is, I think it's a pretty big number, but I'm pretty sure there are hundreds of women in cybersecurity in Israel. It's just the 85 women that I know and can personally bring into one room once a month. And again, I think it's just because it's a small country, it's a small community. It's easy for me to reach all of these women and create this kind of community. And so I guess the Israeli experience is quite unique.
It's interesting.
And if I can say something, yeah, go ahead. Sorry. So I just wanted to say one last thing, and that is, just as an Israeli, I guess my experience of working in technology and working around the world is also quite different, because Israelis are kind of outspoken, and we have our own culture. So we're kind of aliens anywhere we go. Again, regardless of our gender, if you meet somebody from Israel who's in the tech industry, it doesn't matter where you meet them, they're going to look like an alien the first time, or maybe like Spartans, from like 300, like kind of brusque and aggressive, and regardless of gender or gender perceptions, it's just Israelis are different. So I don't feel that much more different as a woman in technology, but maybe more as an Israeli woman in technology. That's very kind of my identification. I just wanted to add that.
Part of why I feel so much at home in Brussels is that Brussels have a reputation for being kind of pushy and obnoxious.
I get in trouble in Seattle. Seattle is the land of the passive-aggressive, and I have learned that I need to include a lot of emoticons and hashbangs and things like that in my emails, just so that I don't sound terrifying to people. So, if I do my usual email, which looks a lot more like a tweet than an email, people think I'm mad at them. So I'm going to have to move to Tel Aviv and just kind of hang out there for a little while.
Yeah, it's also a lot sunnier than Seattle. So, bring your sunscreen and your hats.
Nope. I have many hats and lots of sunscreen, but I'm not a fan of the sun. So you're going to have to keep the beaches. I will take the mountains. I live about 100 miles away from
we're super flat.
I live about 100 miles, maybe 70 miles away from Forks, Washington, which, as we all know from the Twilight series, is the city in the world that gets the least sun, or city in the U.S. at least. So, you've read Twilight, one assumes. Tell the truth.
No, I have not read it.
I've driven through Forks on the way to tour camp, but I haven't read Twilight.
Yeah, I know tour camp is near Forks. Yes, that's something I've learned of. So for those of you who don't know, it's a kind of hacker maker camp, and it should be something fun. Tour camp.
The next one is next summer.
talk about the way that we get a chance to meet each other. One of the things that I noticed about being female in technology is there is a lack of a critical mass when it comes to information spread. And since my academic work was in things like social network analysis and combinatorics, I note when there's not a hub to pass information along. So Keren is serving as a hub now in Israel. What are you doing, Meredith and Tarah, in Brussels and wait, are you in Wellington? You're in Wellington, aren't you?
I'm in
Tarah?
Wellington.
Yeah. So what are you doing in those areas?
Well, interestingly, despite having officially left the game industry from a professional standpoint, I'm actually working to build out Women in Games New Zealand here, because the game industry here is very, very, very small, and just the development of that in general is, it takes a lot of effort. I think people underestimate how much difficulty there is in getting people to get excited and communicate and share that sort of information, particularly when you're dealing with a culture that is actually quite different. Something that I underestimated quite a lot before I moved here is the effects of tall poppy syndrome and how that prevents people from sharing their successes and in turn sharing the information and knowledge that comes with those successes.
Can we talk about that a little more, because that's something that that actually is starting to bother me about about some of the rhetoric that I'm starting to see, like just in the sort of tech narrative generally. I mean, like I've seen people unironically advocating that tech culture should adopt the law of Yanta, and I have a real problem with that. I mean, because that's institutionalizing tall poppy syndrome, and creating a way for power players of any gender to cut people down. And yeah, I mean, it seems to be people with Scandinavian background I see it coming from. So maybe there's so maybe that's the. Oh, I mean, I guess should we explain the whole tall poppy thing better?
Well, yeah. Keren wants to know what tall poppy syndrome is. Go for it.
I can go for it. So tall poppy syndrome, like, I can't claim to be an expert in it. I've only been here 2 years. But effectively, it's this sort of overlying cultural thing where you just do a good job and, you have successes, but you don't boast about them. You don't make a big fuss out of it, which, fair enough. There are some people who could deal with being a little more humble. But the flip side of that is this really awful thing where when somebody does excel, when they become the tall poppy that stands out and they've had some great success and they've gotten some attention for it, people actively cut them down for it. It manifests in very much that kind of, as you said with Seattle, the kind of passive-aggressive culture of just, well, nitpicking somebody behind their back or demeaning their accomplishment. In ways that are just really, really harmful. Like, sometimes people really should be kind of put out front and center and shown, like, you did such a great job. Thank you so much. Great benefit to the company. Here, that's actually kind of a risk to be in that situation.
And there's a horrible variant.
Nuance,
There's a horrible variant on this that I've seen a couple of times in the hacker and security community. In fact, almost any technology community, and I just saw it again a couple of days ago in a situation where a woman who is doing a great job doing what she's doing, helping to work promoting diversity, was attacked by someone who said, you should just focus more on learning to be a real hacker and not worry so much about this community where you don't have enough credibility in it to be someone who should be talking about these issues. And it was really devastating to see because this woman's amazing, she's doing a great job. And as I was talking to her, I said, this is just something that happens when you create things. But the tall poppy syndrome variant that she was facing was not just you shouldn't be out there, but you're not real enough, you're not part enough of this community to be someone who should be talking about it. Yeah, Keren, talk about it.
So I guess now that I know what this tall poppy thing you speak of, I can relate to it. And I definitely had a similar experience, especially in the past year. So I don't know how many of the viewers of the Hangout know this or know anything about me, but last year I became the first Israeli woman to speak at TED, at the annual TED, the big one, the same one that Snowden was at. Oh, thanks, Tara. The same one that Snowden spoke at, and of course Bill Gates and a lot
That's
of other.
That's my co-author right there, y'all. That's my co-author for the Woman in Tech book. She's killer. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
Nice.
Thanks, Tara. I guess it's kind of funny that I didn't even mention that in this Hangout, because it's not like the only item in my bio. It's one thing that I did was a 16-minute talk, and I think I did a pretty good job talking about why hackers are a crucial part of the world, and I think a lot of people connected with that message. But it's also something which is was a result of my, I guess, 15 years in the security industry. But now that it's gotten like a lot of visibility, 1.5 million people have seen it, and I get emails from all over the world from people who've seen it. Now all of a sudden I get some supportive comments, but I also get a lot of like hackers or just people in the technology industry here in Israel or abroad that don't like this prominence, and they're like, who is this hacker cheerleader person? Why is he speaking about us? And I think this is kind of gatekeeping, you could call it, right? So once somebody makes something prominent and creates something and tries to do something in the world, then there could also be this kind of gatekeeping phenomenon saying, oh, is that person one of us? Is she legit? Is she really a card-carrying member of the hacker community or the technology community? And personally, I think that's bullshit. And what I try to do is to just combat that bullshit in any way I can. And it's not just about trying to build an armor to insults or trolls or comments. That's very hard, by the way. And one thing which has worked for me is to really start this group for Israeli women in cybersecurity and try to also elevate them and try to also shed some of the, like, for instance, when I get invited to speak in places and I can't make it, I try to say, hey, you know what, I can't make it, but here's a fantastic speaker. And I try to, give the stage to someone new and try to give them some of the spotlight. And in that way, I hope I'm, doing something good and trying to kind of maybe mitigate this tall poppy thing as well at the same time. So I wanted to.
That gatekeeping thing happen on several different occasions with a lot of people, and it's something that I actually fight really hard with too, now that Keren has brought it up. This imposter syndrome, tall poppy syndrome, but gatekeeper syndrome is a horrible one, because if you know it's coming in advance, it will stop you from doing cool things. And I don't know that I've ever had too much of an issue with imposter syndrome really until I started writing the Women in Tech book and bringing these women together to write these perspectives on technology. It wasn't imposter syndrome that hit me so hard a couple of weeks ago, even though I kind of thought it was. It was anticipation of gatekeeper syndrome. I know what's coming. And the thing Keren's describing, the thing that I've experienced before that a lot of women have, which is being asked to repeatedly prove that you're good enough, that you're the person who should be talking about this. I know it's coming, and it's horrifying, and I am trying hard and have more or less succeeded in not letting it stop me, but it's a penalty in advance I'm paying, and I'm going to keep paying it, just like Keren has now discovered it. I know Meredith's got a point, too. Go for it, Meredith.
Yeah, well, the thing that I find really messed up is that, at least for me, the last several people to, try to take me down a peg in that way have all been women. And I think that's messed up. I mean, I don't really understand why it is. I'm, not great at, modeling the preferences and mental states of strangers, but I don't really understand why people do this.
I will say that on my end, being American works in my come on, brain. It works well for me here because everybody expects that I'm going to be enthusiastic, that I'm going to I'm going to be loud, I'm going to be obnoxious, which is hilarious because I'm a very, very quiet, introverted, I'm an INTJ person, don't look at me, I would like to hide. But here, because there's so much of this, whittling people down, taking them down a peg, I really like supporting people. That's actually part of why I moved into community. I was actually handed a AAA art producer role at Xbox that I wanted, so bad in my early 20s, And I didn't want it anymore. I gave it up so I could go to PopCap, so I could work with community, and I could work with facilitating these communications and making people, feel good about what they're doing. So in moving here, everybody expects me to be kind of obnoxious and, a little too enthusiastic. So I kind of use that in my benefit. I will totally lift up coworkers. I will totally lift up other great people in the industry, because if they're going to be penalized for putting that front and center, they don't have to. I'll put it front and center. I'll take the obnoxious American, but they still get the kudos back out of that. Like, people deserve to feel proud when they've done something really amazing, and I think it's limiting the industry a bit that, particularly when they get to, trying to create a game and pushing it out to a larger market, when you're shuffling your feet and going, well, I made a thing and I guess it's okay, nobody's going to want to play that. If you're not at least really enthusiastic about what you've done, no one else is going to care, It's a sad truth, but, like, it really does matter. You need to be happy with what you've made. And right now, that doesn't exist.
I've got a question from the audience. This is somebody who messaged me privately about this, and something I talk a lot about in salary negotiations when I talk to women in tech is there is an economic penalty for women in not being liked. It's not just that it's a thing that women do where they need monetary cost in the workplace to not being liked by people. And yet, at the same time, to excel, you have to be acceptant of the fact that you're not going to be liked by people. I have come to realize that there are a lot of people that don't like me, and I've had to become okay with that. How do you respond to the idea that or even the pressure on yourself, a need to be liked, or that pressure to be liked to fit in, and the conflict with needing to be an individual and excel at the same time, which is going to lead to people not liking you? How have you responded to that? And do you have any really great anecdotes about that?
So, I'm a spurg, for starters, and, I pretty much always not fit in. And so I got used to that pretty early on. But there's actually a little more to it, if you don't mind me rambling for a little bit. So I was talking the other day on Facebook with my fiance and a friend of ours who I've known for probably 15 years back in Houston. And, she faced a lot more social pressure growing up, to sort of, change her behavior to meet other people's expectations. She would hear people say you're loud and obnoxious and take that as, as an incentive to change her behavior. I just heard you're loud and obnoxious and went, okay, that's what I'm like, and just sort of kept on being the same way because I just didn't really know any better. And in a way, I think that's actually functioned like armor. It's an incredibly useful skill to learn if you can pick it up.
For me, I guess it's kind of interesting because my whole job in a lot of ways is mitigating conversation and making sure that communication comes through as impactful as it needs to be without hurting everybody's feelings in a lot of ways. But I have definitely throughout my career run into those instances where it's just like, well, this is important enough to the product, to the company, to the larger business goals, that's fine. Someone's going to hate me out of this. I'm going to do my best to, for me, I always come prepared with facts. I was like, look, this is what's happening. This is the repercussions. This is what I predict will happen if we don't address this situation. It's your call because this is your, responsibility. This aspect of the product is yours. I'm just the communication point. But my advice is, X, Y, Z. And sometimes, people are going to get hurt out of that, but generally, if you lay out the facts, you show the direct reaction of what, is coming out of those decisions, people are pretty understanding of it. I know that, there are probably a couple people in the industry who really don't like me, but, I've tried very hard to be very fair and very upfront about what decisions are being made, why they're being made. And, sometimes I do have to put my personal opinion in things, but always at the end of the day, if it's their part of, the business, that's their part of the business. If it sinks, that sucks.
Let me ask the very specific question to Keren about this not being liked thing, because I know you've experienced this with the TED Talks and stuff like that. It's not about whether you have been liked before. I think I share an experience with you of having done something reasonably cool and having people like it and having people attack me for it. The question is not have you found before that being liked is a conflict for you, but would you ever do another TED Talk now that you know what's coming at you? And if yes, how do you defend yourself against it?
That's a great question. So I got to tell you, when I was preparing for TED, and it's a long process, and when you prepare for TED, for the official one, you work with their coaches, and there's a whole production schedule, and it's really, you work on it for months. And I knew in the process of gearing up to it, I knew that I would have people respond to what I'm doing, and that, hackers would be like, is she really a hacker? And people are going to be like, well, we don't really agree with what you're saying. And there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to necessarily like what I was doing. I didn't know exactly how the response would be. And actually, I have to say, I was overwhelmed with the positive response to the talk. And that's really helped kind of, weigh out the less positive responses. But the way for me to prepare for that was, not just to accept that maybe some people are not going to like it. For me, it was just about, maybe this is what you girls were talking about earlier with the tall poppy. It was just about doing like a bang-up job, like really preparing, knowing my stuff top to bottom, researching every point, making sure that everything is something that I believe in, sticking to my guns, to my point of view, but having that, really, really establishing my point of view in a very, very clear way. That really helped me, because I knew that even if people are not going to like it, I'm very proud of what I did, and I stand behind what I did. And any talks and things that I'll do in the future, and last summer I spoke at DEF CON, and I was more terrified to speak at DEF CON in a way than to speak at TED or powerful rich people, great, but talk to 3,000 hackers, you'll get you'll know, and if they don't like it, they'll let you know right away. It's not going to be like later on you're going to see some snarky comments. It's going to be people yelling bullshit at you during the talk. And for that, I was okay. I was, gearing up and saying, okay, I'm just going to do the best job that I can. I'm going to make sure that every point I make makes a difference and is important, and that I provide value to the people that are listening to me, and that I'm still sticking to what I believe in. And I guess that's probably the best advice or the best commentary that I can suggest. Maybe it's a cliche, but if you do stuff that you believe in, if you're true to yourself and you make sure that you got everything down right, then if some people don't like it, that's fine. I'm still very proud of what I did and what I'm gonna do. And I guess that's the best approach one could have. It's not an armor; it's more of a a defensive mechanism. But it's just do the best job you can, really.
Fair
My
enough.
personal policy for the last couple,
Yeah, go ahead, Meredith.
my personal policy for the last couple of years has been only ever double down on math. Let people have whatever bullshit, whatever ridiculous opinions they want to have. Double down on the stuff that matters, and you save a lot of time that way.
Let me ask everyone. Tara, do you have one last thing you want to say on this point?
Oh, no. I was just agreeing.
Sounds good. Let me ask everybody, if you could, what is your best piece of advice for any woman starting out in technology, no matter where she is in the world, to tune out the negative and to find the positive voices and help? What's the best piece of advice you can give? Make it 3 sentences. Go.
We're starting with me. I would say, if you can, find, it doesn't have to be a direct mentor, but find other women in the industry, connect, have that communication, form those relationships. Some of the best career advice I have ever gotten has been from, 2 fantastic women in the industry who helped me so much just in understanding the difficulties of my career, how to get past them, and when to fight versus when to just, all right, you gotta let that battle drop. Like, it's not always. I was a very black and white thinker. Let's just put it that way, and that caused a lot of communication issues.
find the thing you love more than anything else, and nobody can ever take that away from you because you have your own compilers and interpreters, and no one can take them away. You know, for me, that thing is parsing. For you, it could be anything.
And my piece of advice would just be ask smart questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, learn things as you go along, and don't be afraid to sit at the table, ask questions. Don't stand up for bullshit. If it looks like somebody, a woman or a man or whomever is bullshitting you, stand up to that. Ask smart questions. Find out the truth for yourself, and then, you know, that's gonna help, I think, help you get better at what you do and grow as a person.
There's a lot of stupid answers. There aren't any stupid questions.
Here.
That's right.
And the last piece, I'll jump in with one last piece of advice from one of my mentors that I'm going to twist into a good piece of advice, which is nobody knows what they're doing. Everyone is making it up as they go along. Everyone is. No matter how famous they are, I'm making it up. Everyone's making it up as they go along. And so this is the definition of an expert. An expert is someone who hasn't known what they've been doing longer than you. That's the only difference there. So always ask for help. Don't be scared to ask the mentors that you've heard of, and ask all of us. We're on Twitter. Come find us. You can ask us questions there. Thank you so very much to the women that have joined me today in our broadcast. It's been wonderful. I'm so glad we got a chance to answer all these questions. Thank you very much to Keren Elazari in Tel Aviv, to Meredith Patterson in Brussels, Belgium, and to Tarah Brannigan in Wellington, New Zealand, where the hobbits live. I've had a wonderful time today. I will see you folks again next week, and we'll talk to you very soon. Note that during the week of DEF CON, I will not be here because I'll be partying hard with half of the people in this panel. I'll talk to you all soon and see you next week. Bye-bye.